Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the town hall for Remaking the Online Fee. We appreciate your taking the time to join in this important conversation this evening. I'm Michelle Giovinazzi. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Academic Innovation. And joining me as panelists this evening, we have Provost Susan Jeffords, the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Kiara Wing, PSU Student Extraordinaire and Student Fee Committee Chair, Dom Chen, another PSU Student Extraordinaire and Student Fee Committee Vice Chair, Amy Mulcairn, Vice Provost for Academic Budget and Planning, and Alexander Sager, Faculty and Philosophy Department Chair. We have a presentation that we will share with you this evening, taking turns sharing slides as panelists. We will hold the questions to the end until we have the review of our considerations and process, and then we will open up Q&A for questions to be added in the Q&A function of Zoom. We are here as much today to hear your feedback and field your questions as share an update. So we look forward to that interactive part of our presentation. And we are scheduled for 1 hour from 5 to 6 p.m. this evening. With that, I will turn it over to Provost Jeffords, who will provide some background on this work.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank all of you for joining us this evening to be part of this really important conversation. I wanted to say just a little bit to provide context for why we're even having this conversation right now. Much of this has been driven by questions that we have received from students for the last 2 years. Relating to the online fee, relating to the services provided for remote instruction. As you all know, as well as anyone, the pandemic forced us to rethink the way that we're offering instruction ourselves, along with all other universities in the country. And we came to rely more on our technology support and the technology infrastructure that enabled us to switch most of our classes to a remote context. And that has raised for all of us the question of how we are supporting that infrastructure. And I think it became apparent that we started kind of blurring the lines between strictly online courses and remote courses. And students quite rightly came forward and said, well, what's the difference? Help us understand why one course is this type, one course has a fee, the others don't, and so on. And so I think that prompted us to begin to have a broader conversation about the online fee. And that conversation has already engaged lots of stakeholders around campus. And we have an opportunity tonight to engage all of you as well. So I think you're going to hear some good thoughts that have been put together by a group of folks who have been studying this issue for the past 6 months or so. And they'll be able to share some of their ideas with you. And we truly look forward to hearing your feedback and your thoughts about the ideas that have been developed by a really strong group of folks who have been listening and engaging with the campus over the past year on this topic. So I'm happy to be here this evening. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your questions, your feedback, your comments as this town hall moves forward. So let's go ahead and get started with the presentation.
Thank you, Susan. We'll turn it over to Kiara, who's going to talk with us about the next slide and the increasing need for digital learning options.
So as you all know, the need for flexibility in our lives has never been more apparent. This is especially true for the demand for online and flexible learning options. The number of fully online courses at PSU has increased 114% between 2014 and 2019. And in 2019, over 80% of PSU graduates took at least one online course. All those numbers were before COVID. And as we know, as the pandemic caused an overnight universal shift to digital learning. And the benefits of online and hybrid classes were very apparent for many students. They had more convenience and more flexibility. They had lower transportation costs and lower childcare costs. They were able to do self-paced learning, and many more graduated on time. So PSU aims to meet students where they are and teach them how they need and want to be taught, so that students have the flexibility of managing school around life rather than life around school. Digital learning allows us to do this. So it's all about achieving a digital learning setting in an equitable way. So now I'll pass it on to my vice chair, Dom.
All right, so over the years, the fee has evolved, but through these evolutions, not only have we learned more about the need of these resources like Kiara was talking about, but we've also learned about some of the unintended consequences that come with it. So as we've gone through this process, we've learned that both students and faculty are sometimes making choices around the fee structure rather than the teaching and learning needs, which is pretty unfortunate because it's these needs, the teaching and learning needs, that should drive the formats of these courses and not the fee itself. We've also discovered that a smaller group of students pay a disproportionate amount of the fee because it's only applied to students taking online courses. And digital benefits are included in a lot more courses and arguably all course platforms. As we've talked about it, some folks have pointed out that platforms like Zoom and Canvas are used in every class, which the online piece of the fee supports. And as a consequence, students taking online courses subsidize other students taking classes in other forms. And as we talked about on the last slide, digital learning is very much needed by students, and these students who need these flexible and accessible formats are paying a disproportionate amount of money, which is definitely not ideal. All right, and I will go ahead and pass it off back to Michelle.
Thanks, Dom and Kiara. So in response to the growing need and interest in online, flexible, and other forms of digital learning, and the feedback that the current fee structure was not keeping up with the times and meeting needs, a cross-campus group came together to find a solution to look at improved alternatives for the online fee. I want to thank all the stakeholders who've contributed to this process thus far. That includes a working group that consisted of Kevin Berg, Don Chen, Nicole DuPont, Megan Looney, Alex Sager, Tui Vu, Corey Watkins, Julie Smith, and Kiara Wang. In addition to the working group, we also had a stakeholder advisory group who provided leadership and perspective across the university, including Cliff Allen, Cindy Bakar, Kurt Kelly, Amanda Bierbauer, Andrea Garrity, Andrea Johnson, Amy Mulcairn, and Michelle Toppy. We also consulted the Student Fee Committee, student representative to the Board of Trustees Budget Committee, the Provost, the Executive Council, and the Budget Office. So other than a lot of conversations, what did that mean? We had a deep period of research, evaluation, and engagement over 9 months of meetings and conversations. We reviewed 8 different alternative models around the key principles of equity and affordability for students. So we will share with you in the next slides what that response consisted of. Next slide, please. We talked about the compelling increasing need for digital, flexible, and online learning. What that means is equality is important. This is key to the present and the future for PSU students. And to deliver on that, we need to ensure that the options, the resources, and the supports that we have are of the highest quality. High quality digital courses are built for the purpose of online and flexible learning. The online environment is very different from a classroom environment and requires different resources, different expertise, different supports, and different systems. It takes a lot of time and effort to intentionally design a high quality digital course that is engaging, collaborative, interactive, and relevant. We want to make sure that we provide a variety of digital tools and high impact digital multimedia. We want to make sure we incorporate a broad swath of digital interactions, whether that's instructor with students, students with students, or students with content. We want to ensure that our courses, that PSU's online and flexible courses, are designed and taught to the latest and highest standards for student success, supported with staff and infrastructure. And to do this, it takes intentional design, expertise, and resources that need to be funded in a sustainable way. On the next slide, I'll speak to the current online fee, how that's structured and what that will cover. What we've done here is we've taken the current online fee of $35 and broken it out by categories funded by the fee. As you'll see, the first bucket on the left-hand side, $7.48 of that $35, or approximately 20% of the online fee goes to fund resources and support for students learning and navigating PSU. That includes things like student success initiatives, some advising, tutoring, and transfer and returning student support and services. The bulk of the online fee, or approximately 60%, or $19.86 of $35, goes to support the design, development, and maintenance, as well as ongoing growth and improvement of accessible and engaging courses and experienced instructors. This includes things like the design of quality online and flexible courses, instructional design and technology support, faculty training in digital tools and online teaching pedagogies, and multimedia development and support. And then in the third category on the right-hand side of the screen, the remaining 20% of the $35, or approximately $7.67, goes to cover tools and platforms for digital learning. The preponderance of academic technology, including video streaming, online conferencing, virtual collaboration, open education resources, and system administration support for these platforms, is funded by the online fee. That includes, but is not limited to, formerly D2L, now the Canvas Learning Management System, Zoom, Turnitin, Proctorio, PebblePad, Kaltura, Respondus, Pressbooks, VoiceThread, and others. A wide variety of academic technologies now, and even more in the emerging future, to ensure that we keep up with the opportunity, the quality, and the technology that allows us to innovate and continue to deliver quality digital learning. Some of these costs, as you may see, do not directly relate to the online fee. That's one of the challenges that we're hoping to address with this process. And some of those expenses or areas covered by the fee may need to shift. This is an important part of remaking the online fee, and we'll speak to that specifically in a subsequent slide. I'll now turn it over to Amy, who's going to talk about the student financial implications of the online fee.
Thank you, Michelle. As we look at remaking the online fee, it's important to understand how this might impact students, especially as many are on the edge of being able to afford college. As a course fee, the current online fee may or may not be included in a student's individual financial aid package, and that could end up being a surprise when the tuition bill comes. For example, PSU's 4 years free and transfer students free do not cover course fees. Also, employers or international sponsor agencies that might cover a student's tuition and fees may not cover online fees. So for example, if a student is taking 8 credits of online, this might be an unplanned cost of an extra $280 to cover their fee. So as we're looking at this process, it's important for us to also think how we might support this cost to those students who may not be able to afford this. And as we look at the next slide, there's some important work ahead of us. As Michelle mentioned, we need to ensure that the costs that are covered by the online fee are aligned with the intent of the online fee. And so we'll continue to ensure that the online fee or the future fee will cover technology, people, and services for the intended beneficiaries of those who are paying them. And I will turn this over to Alex to talk through the next part.
Great, thank you, Amy. So when we started this work and started to look at different models for the online fee, kind of one of our obvious questions was, well, if you have a bunch of models, what criteria do you use to compare them, to choose between them? And in our conversations, we came up with 4 elements that we thought were important. So the first element is equity, or that's equitable. And you know, the questions of equity are complicated and sometimes fraught, but we thought there were 2 things that stood out to us. And one was the question, you might say, of fairness. And the way that the online fee is set up right now is that students taking classes designated as online, they pay the fee, and everybody else doesn't pay the fee, except classes that are remote or hybrid or even in-person classes are using services and using technologies that the students that are paying the online fee are using. So there were concerns about that. And then the other question of equity is who is impacted. And there were concerns that often students who need to rely on online classes may be vulnerable in different ways. So there was a real concern that we were putting a disproportionate burden on some of our more vulnerable students. Our second element was a question of affordability, and we looked at questions about the number of students impacted and the relative proportional cost to benefits. And as we'll look at it in a minute with different models, how you spread out the fee makes a big difference in students' individual tuition bills. And then another thing that I think was Amy just mentioned was whether the fee is eligible for financial aid or if there's another way of providing remissions for some of those fees, since affordability is a big question for our students. The third element was that the fee be comprehensible. And one of the things I've enjoyed with working with this group is learning about the different things that the fee covers. And our thought is that it's really important that we're transparent here, we're clear on what the fee supports, how it benefits students, and also that it's easy to implement. So that's another consideration. The last one is a question of financial sustainability, and this is important both for the services and technologies that the fee supports. We need to know that we can rely on these in the future, but also is extremely important for students. So we don't want the fee to fluctuate widely from year to year, so students can prepare. I'm going to just say something about the models under review in the next slide. And so, as we mentioned earlier, we looked carefully at 8 models and had extensive discussions with stakeholders about which ones to present. And here what we're doing is we're presenting 2 of the models for your feedback. And I really want to emphasize that we really want to get your feedback on these models. So the 3 models, Michelle will speak to the details in a moment, but the 3 models are, first of all, there's the current fee. This is what we have right now, where students are charged per credit hour, and they're only charged for classes that are labeled as online. So for example, if you take a course that's labeled as remote right now, students are not paying the online fee. And then the second model, this is one of the new models we looked at, would be a mandatory fee. And the model we're looking at is there would be a charge per student credit hour, and it would apply to all classes regardless of the modality. And the third model is a course fee, and this would also be charged per student credit hour, but it would apply to all courses except courses that are in person only. And Michelle will speak to this in just a moment, but one of the reasons why we looked at the course fee model is there are some questions about implementing a mandatory fee. Among other things, it gets rolled into tuition, and there's some challenges for the process of getting a mandatory fee approved. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle now. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. We can advance to the next slide. So many of you are likely familiar with the current model for the online fee, which charges $35 per student credit hour for all courses that are coded online. In other words, a student taking 4 credits of online courses would pay approximately $140 per term. A student taking 12 credits or 3 4-credit courses of online courses would pay roughly $420 a term. And a student taking 16 credits would pay $560 a term under the current model for the online fee. Not only is it notable who pays for the fee, it's also notable who doesn't pay for the fee. As Alex said, this fee model disproportionately loads the costs for online flexible digital learning to students who have a need or preference for taking online courses. The current fee is not charged for remote, hybrid, attend anywhere, and other flexible and digital models that may be offered. Yet these are courses that use the same technology and may offer some overlap in learning experiences as online courses. And that's part of why the current online fee model was deemed problematic, and we look to find solutions. The expanded use of digital technology across all programs, from classroom to hybrid online, not only now, but moving forward in the future, means that the services and academic technology funded by the online fee reaches and impacts and serves a broader category of students, not just those enrolled in online courses. So if we move to the next slide, it is possible to entertain or maintain the current online fee model. We're moving that forward as a potential model for consideration, but we're also looking at 2 additional alternatives that we feel better reach that criteria that we reviewed, that Alex reviewed for us earlier. So the additional 2 models that are being presented for consideration are a mandatory fee model and a course fee model. The mandatory fee, as the name implies, would be charged to all courses. The course fee would be charged to any courses that are not in person. You may notice that all 3 of these models are charged per student credit hour. We looked at fees that were charged per student, per part-time, full-time student, per course, but looking at the proportionate share, the affordability, the equity, and the fairness, determine that a student credit hour model allows us to best distribute those costs in a way that meets the criteria we discussed. So all 3 of these models are per credit hour model. The mandatory fee would charge approximately $8.15 per student credit hour for all courses. It's mandatory as the name implies. So any course, regardless of format or modality, regardless of how it's coded, would be charged this fee. This is the lowest per credit fee and would spread the expenses across all students as it's charged for all courses. The impact of this fee model would be approximately $32.60 per term for a 4-credit load, up to $130.40 per term for a 16-credit load. I do want to qualify that these are approximate amounts. Once we determine the final fee model for consideration, we will revisit these numbers and may dial them in a little bit with consideration for expenses and potential remissions and other needs. The second alternative fee model we're advancing is the course fee model. Again, this is also a per student credit hour model, would be charged approximately $20.15 per student credit hour. This is a moderate mid-range fee. It would be spread across almost all students, but not all students. It would be spread across any course that is not in person. In other words, a student taking a full in-person course load, only attending classes on campus, would pay no fees or $0 per term. A student taking 1 4-credit course in a term would pay $82 in fees that term. And a student taking 3 or approximately 12 credits of not in-person or digital courses that term would pay $246. I'm sorry, $246. And to clarify, these fees again are just the course fee for those courses. So you'll see we have the current fee model is the highest alternative. The course fee is a moderate fee charged across more students in the online fee, but not the full student body. The mandatory fee would be charged at the lowest level to all students. We are looking for feedback on these models for consideration of the best path forward, and the goal is to implement the new fee in the fall term of 2022. Again, we welcome your questions and your feedback on these options. And I will turn it over to Susan to provide some closing remarks.
My apologies, I couldn't find the unmute button. So thank you all again for being here to listen to this information. I hope that you see that there has been a lot of thought and a lot of work that has gone into the presentation that you heard today. And we absolutely want to hear your thoughts. Student input will inform the final fee structure that we determine. And so your feedback is absolutely critical as we think through the final recommendations that come out of this process. There is a feedback form that will be made available to you so that you can provide feedback outside of this format, but also we are pleased to be able to open up the conversation to hear your feedback today, but I also encourage you to provide written feedback through the online form as you've had a chance to think further about what you heard today. So Michelle, do we want to move to questions?
Yes, let's go ahead and move to questions. So
Hi,
we can
everyone.
end the slideshow.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paige Parker from University Communications, and I'll be moderating the chat for this portion. I'm going to just go to some questions that we got in advance before I start taking questions from the chat. So one person wrote in and said, what are faculty doing to make the online learning experience as beneficial and relevant to their students as in-person classes? And Alex, you're on the faculty. Can you speak to that?
Great, thanks, Paige. It's a big question, isn't it? Let me just maybe preface this question with a remark. My belief is that there are quality online classes, and online is a different modality, but in my view, just knowing what colleagues are doing, I think there are a lot of high quality online classes at PSU. And sometimes, you know, when I start talking about online, and I used to be as kind of a skeptic about online, I just kind of like to point out that a lot of the issues you see with online classes, you also see in face-to-face classes with pedagogy. And I think a lot of the people who, you know, take their face-to-face classes very seriously also, you know, have the same standards for online. But as I say, I think we all recognize at this point that a quality online class is different than what you do as a face-to-face class. When we started with online, a lot of people thought, well, you just kind of video record your lectures and, you know, that's going to be it. And that's certainly not the case. So in my department, many of us have worked with colleagues in the Office of Academic Innovation. Many of us have had stipends to develop classes and really got into a deep dive to think about what is the appropriate way of structuring an online class for the class. And obviously it's going to vary a lot from department to department, class to class, subject to subject. And, you know, it's a big question, but I think there's a lot of very basic things about design that make a difference. I'm sure everybody's had experiences with online courses that you thought, hey, this was a great class, and online classes where you thought there could be some work. And I think there's just an awful lot to learn about, you know, different ways of approaching pedagogy, different ways of using technology to connect students, different ways for faculty to provide feedback effectively in an environment where you don't see each other face to face. And I really do believe that a lot of this work is going on at PSU, and I think we have a lot of great people, you know, helping us with that. So,
Thanks, Alex. I'm going to take another question here from those that were asked in advance. Someone wonders, is one of the fee models just no fee? Why are you charging multiple online fees? This seems a little bit like a misconception to me. Michelle, would you take this one on?
Sure, Paige, I'm happy to answer that question. While it may seem that there are multiple online fees, I want to clarify that we're proposing alternative models. We're not suggesting that fees be added. We're suggesting we change and improve the structure of the fee. So the intent is to actually distribute and minimize the financial impact, not add to further financial impact to students. That being said, in an ideal world, the university would be fully funded by other sources. Budget would not be an issue. Finances would be unlimited. That isn't the case. And these services that we've just reviewed and identified as so crucial to delivering high quality, innovative, future digital learning need to be funded in some way. Those are not currently covered by general fund or other university budgets. So we need to maintain that funding to be able to ensure to provide those services, improve on those services, and continue to meet future needs in a high quality, innovative way that ensures student success.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to move to a question that came in through the chat. And that is, how do we support or incentivize faculty to improve their online teaching practices? Michelle or perhaps Susan, would you be able to take this on?
I think that's a terrific question, and it's a goal that we all have. And I'm really pleased to say that we've recently had conversations about a university-wide strategic investment fund that the president initiated and asked for proposals for how best to use these one-time funds that we have. And one of the proposals that was funded there, one of the most important ones, in my opinion, is funding to provide support to faculty to develop and improve online courses and the use of digital technologies across all of our different learning modalities. So I think that we are about to make a significant investment in faculty development to make sure that courses are of the quality that we all expect, and that faculty have all the tools available to them to be successful in teaching in the multiple modalities that we now hear from students are of interest to them. One of the things that has come out of the pandemic is very strong voices from students saying, I want to be able to choose among multiple ways in which I'd like to access my learning. And we want to be sure that faculty are ready to be able to respond to that request from students.
Thanks, Susan. Another question that came in before the presentation was, since PSU is becoming a hybrid or blended learning institution, shouldn't online costs be included in base pricing for all classes? Michelle, can you take that one?
Sure, I think that's a simple question with a somewhat complicated answer, but I'll do my best. If someone else wants to contribute at the end, feel free to do so. I think this relates to the earlier question. In an ideal world, these resources would be otherwise funded. But as it currently stands, we need to generate separate resources to fund all the costs that we covered, from student success to instructional design and professional development and support and academic technology. When we looked at the 8 alternative models, we did discuss potentially including the costs in tuition. We arrived at that consideration because we were looking at how could we best align the costs with the users of the fee and tie it in with ways that the fee is applied. While those resources are used more heavily by the online courses and the digitally and flexibly developed courses, there is some impact on other courses. So looking at a model that stretched across all students made sense. So that led us to look at both the potentially wrapping the fee into tuition by increasing tuition, or a mandatory fee model, which would retain a separate fee to be charged to all students. When we put those side by side, we determined that it was much more sustainable and would better ensure long-term continuation of funding for teaching, learning, innovation, academic technology, particularly in the area of digital learning, if we propose that as a mandatory fee rather than wrapping it into tuition where there may be competing demands for those resources. So overall, it was a question of sustainability and ensuring that we were able to fund the level of quality and innovation that we want to be able to deliver in the future that led us to look at the mandatory fee model instead of including it in tuition.
Thanks, Michelle. I think that answer covered a couple of questions that we've had come in through the live chat as well. So here's one that came in through the live chat. Based on the trajectory of the ongoing use of online and digital educational formats, especially with consideration to safe methods of learning during a pandemic, are there plans and efforts by the state to allocate more funds to its educational budget? Well, that's a big question. I don't know if we have anyone who can answer it. Is anybody able to tackle that one?
I don't know that I can fully answer the question, but I can tell you that we're in the second year of next year will be the second year of the biennium. So the amount allocated for general resources has been set from the state for basically the next 2 years, this year and the next year. And so I think it's probably ongoing conversations of what that would look like in the future. I can say that because of funding methodologies and great work that was done both by Kevin Neely and Kevin Reynolds, we have received some additional funding through that model, which is coming into the university. But that is really helping to offset kind of lost revenue through declining enrollment. So while there is perhaps opportunities there, and we're seeing that, it's probably still not going to fully allow us to not think through how do we cover these costs as we move forward.
Thank you, Amy.
Let me just add one or two things about that. I do think this is a really smart question about if this is the direction of higher education, should this be something the state looks at to help fund? And I think that's a great question. I'm not sure, I don't have an inside track to the mind of the state legislature, but I think it would be an interesting conversation for student organizations potentially to pose to legislators to ask for their support. I will say that as part of the work of this group, there was a look at what other universities in the state do in supporting online courses and in supporting digital learning. And I think with maybe only one exception, the rest of the universities do actually charge a fee as well. And so most of the universities in Oregon, the public universities, have taken this mechanism to support this work, which tells you on the one hand that everybody finds this work critical to offering instruction in universities these days. And on the other hand, that they're all struggling to figure out how to fund this. So I think it would be a great opportunity to think about whether the state would be willing to do that. But in the meantime, really all of the universities have taken this same approach.
Thanks, Susan. Kiara or Dom, I have a question for you. And it's from somebody who's wondering if there's been any student feedback in support of retaining the current model rather than go with one of the other two models under consideration.
Yes. So this group has done a great job of considering student feedback. So students have been addressed at every single stage. And what students are coming back as is the current model has a little bit of inequitability to it because online students are forced to subsidize a lot of the services that everyone is using. So that's what we've been hearing from students. We work in student government, and that has what we've been hearing. So
Thanks, Kara. We have a question about whether there are ways for instructors and professors to share which online learning tools have worked for them, share with other instructors across programs. Michelle, can you speak to that?
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to that. And I would say, yes, we certainly have mechanisms and ways for that to happen. Communities of practice, professional development, discussion, conversations, presentations, book groups, all kinds of resources and supports offered by the Office of Academic Innovation. And we also have a very robust OAI Plus website that lists a lot of resources, articles, and other tools for faculty to use. And I would say this is a big part of the work that we see area for ongoing growth, improvement, and expansion is funded by this fee. So as we continue to adopt new modalities, new formats, and mix and match, which is part of the reason that looking at improving this fee is so important, I think we'll move farther away from just an in-person class or just an online course, but to have a toolkit that faculty can use to blend all kinds of things to meet the specific needs of the curriculum and the students. And as we do that, we'll continue through OAI to offer professional development, chances to share best practices, articles and resources, and other training and types of opportunities.
Paige, could I add something? We've spent a good bit of time talking about faculty development and faculty support, which I think is obviously critical. But I also wanted to mention that one of the topics we've discussed is also support for students. That while large numbers of students are accustomed to taking in-person classes and knowing about the best practices for being successful in an in-person class, for many students, an online class or many of the new kind of hybrid formats that we're able to offer are the first time they've participated in a class in that format. And what we see often is that students who are taking those classes for the first time sometimes struggle to figure out, how do you engage in an online forum? How do I contact my instructor online or in a hybrid way? How do I participate in group processes and so on? So I think one of the things we're also exploring is how to support students to become more familiar with the best practices in these kinds of modalities so that they can hit the ground running and be successful from the beginning. I think we shouldn't assume, as we often do with in-person classes, that students know how to engage and be successful in an online format. And so we should be providing some support for that as well. And that's one of the areas that we're exploring in addition to faculty support. And this fee would help provide that kind of context for students as well.
Thank you. Let's see. We have a question about whether there's a place that students can see details or learn more about how the fee is spent or has been spent. Amy or maybe Michelle?
I think Michelle presented this in the slide where there's the breakdown of the dollar, and that's really of the $35. That's really representative of the cost as a whole, right? So not just specific courses, but as a whole. And so I think if you multiply that out, you would see how that funding is being utilized. And it's, we could go back to that slide, but I think that's the best place to look at that to see how that's applied.
Thank you. This is a question about how faculty and staff have been involved in this discussion about the online fee and what it might mean for them. Alex, can you speak to that?
I'd say a little bit. So before we had this public forum, one of the things that we've done, beyond engaging with faculty, with the stakeholder groups, but we've been involved with the Faculty Senate. And there have been presentations to various faculty Senate committees that have given us pretty detailed feedback. For example, the Education Policy Committee, the Budget Committee. And so that's been, I think, a big part of the faculty conversations to engage directly with faculty governance. But I think this forum as well is an opportunity to faculty to learn more about the models and to provide feedback. And there is, of course, the survey, where which is open throughout the campus, and we look forward. I really mean this. We generally look forward to hearing people's feedback about the models.
Thanks, Alex. And that's a good time to remind you all that we do have a feedback form that will drop again in the chat, a link to that, and you will also get a link to that form when you get a follow-up email from registering for this. That will be sent out tomorrow, I believe. So there are a couple different chances you'll have to go to that link and offer your feedback. We had a question come in. I'll try to, it's a little long, so I'll try to summarize it. So the question is, whether there could be expanded access to remote lecture content, because some online classes sometimes don't have lecture videos and seem to be using recycled content in lesson plans. Can someone speak to that? It's okay if we can't.
I can speak to it broadly. I could say that there is faculty discretion in how materials are used, presented, and shared with students. I can say that the Office of Academic Innovation and the services funded by this fee work hard to help support different ways to share that information with the multimedia production and captioning and warehousing and, facilitating ways to capture more video lecture for replay and revision, as well as providing coaching and consultation for faculty who want to further develop and try new methods in reaching students. And I would say that this kind of feedback is helpful in completing the form. If you have specific feedback to share, that's always good for us to hear. And we can ensure that it gets to the right sources and that's shared out for future consideration as well.
Thanks, Michelle. So this question came through. If the fee model is changed, when would that go into effect?
I'll take that one. We're currently aiming for consideration for implementation in fall of 2022. So courses beginning in fall of 2022 would be levied the new fee model. If we're successful, if the recommendation is to change the fee model and we're successful in the implementation of that change.
Thank you. Let's see, do we have predictive modeling to show how each fee option would impact units supported by the online fee? Michelle, don't want to turn to you too much. Maybe this is an Amy question.
Amy is welcome to take it. I also see Kiara nodding. I'm nodding. I wonder
okay.
if you would want to answer, Kiara.
Yes, we did all those different modelings to see the impact onto different the people supported by the online fee, as well as onto students. If you were taking a lot of classes, if you're taking a small amount, you're part-time, you're full-time, we modeled a lot. I'm sure Amy can really go into depth, but we really did see the impact at each level. So yeah, Amy, maybe you can have one more.
I think this this question, and I think another question that exists in the chat, which is how is the money currently spent, and are we using those efficiently? And I think these two kind of tie together in that comment that we need to align the spending to the intent of the fee itself. And we find that there are lots of costs that are supporting students either online or digitally that maybe aren't currently on the online fee, where there might be things on the online fee that don't currently, that are supporting more broadly. So it's hard to answer both those questions until we fully have determined which fee structure that we want to do so that we can align the costs to that fee structure. But we are keeping the whole modeling is with the intention that we're not changing the overall funding available for these services, but we may be prioritizing where they're being funded differently. So that's going to be ongoing work. And there's the feedback form, I think, has this opportunity to answer a little bit of where do you see that disconnect to, their feedback on the fee itself, but you can also make that comment about the type of expenses that might be covered by that fee, or where you feel that they should be prioritized as well, because that just helps understand a greater context as to why there's thoughts that one fee might be and fee model might be more appropriate than another.
Thanks, Amy. Dom or Kiara, person wrote in advance and asked, how do I need to pay, why do I need to pay for SHAC and other fees when I'm a strictly online student?
Yeah, so as chair of the student fee committee, we get this question a lot. A lot of people think that they want to be able to opt out of fees, but that really isn't how mandatory fees work. And also that question may not be in the scope of this online fee town hall because we haven't solidified if this will be a mandatory fee or not. But there are several things that are supported by the fee that you can access virtually. SHAC has made sure of that. They have virtual peer recovery supports. They have a 24-hour nurse hotline, and they have telehealth visits. All of those things you can access from a different state, from a different city. So just because you're online doesn't mean you can't utilize the resources that you support. As well as we fund incidental and building fees. Campus Rec is offering virtual classes. So you don't have to go to the gym if you don't feel comfortable or if you're not in the area to do that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get your bang for your buck. And we are ensuring that. So thank you.
Thanks, Kiera. Dom, did you want to add anything?
I felt like Kira summed it up pretty nicely. So yeah, I'll let
Okay.
that answer speak for itself.
Great, great, thanks. So can we just return to the when and if a change goes into effect in fall 2022, will the fee increase? Michelle?
So absolutely, whether the fee will increase. If you think of the three models that we reviewed, the two alternative models were both less than the $35 current fee. So the per student credit hour fee would not increase. How the fee impacts individual students depends on their course load and how much of that course load, first of all, which model we select, and if that changes. And secondly, how that course load is distributed across online courses versus in-person courses. As you saw, the mandatory fee model had the lowest level of impact for any given student. If I pull my cheat sheet over here, the mandatory fee, a student with a 4 credit course load, which is probably not real usual, would be $32.60 per term. The mandatory fee for a student with 16 credits would be $130.40 per term. For a student for the course fee model, a student taking 3 non-in-person courses would pay $246 per term. A student with a fully online course load would pay no additional fee. But with the current fee model, a student taking 4 credits online would pay $140, and a student taking 16 credits online would pay $560. So for students who are taking online courses or more online courses, any way you slice it and dice it, the two alternative models would be less expensive than the current online fee.
Thank you. We have a question about whether a student can opt out of paying the fee if they do not want to access these types of services. I see, Kiera, you're typing an answer. Do you want to just take it on?
Yes, we do a lot of work with mandatory fees in the student fee committee. Both the incidental and building fee are mandatory. And according to Oregon law, or the ORSs actually say that mandatory fees must be applied to everybody, or else they wouldn't be mandatory, right? So it's actually illegal to selectively charge mandatory fees. So it would have to go under a different model and a different name if there was going to be options for people to not pay for it.
Okay, it's 5 minutes to the hour, and I think we're pretty close to needing to wrap up. Would anyone like to just take us out? And again, I'll drop one more time in the chat the link to the feedback form. Thanks, everyone.
Well, the first thing I want to do is thank everyone again for participating in this discussion. I thought the questions were really smart, very insightful, extremely thoughtful and reflective questions. And I look forward also to hearing your written feedback. So I ask that you consider submitting some written feedback through the forum. I also really want to thank both Kiera and Dom for not only participating in this forum today, but for all of your hard work throughout this whole process. You've provided great leadership. And I can see why students elected you to your positions, because you're just providing extraordinary leadership and partnership as we go through this process. So thank you both so much. And to everybody who served on this committee, Alex and Michelle and everybody who participated, there was so much thoughtful work that went into this, and I think we saw that today. So I just feel like this is a wonderful example of how university processes ought to work. And I'm so excited to see this process move forward and to have everybody's feedback. So thank you all so much.
And I would like to add a special thank you to Paige for dispatching questions. That takes a lot of processing and thinking and juggling, and she did a great job. And I didn't introduce her at the beginning, but she's really been instrumental in the communications and the planning for today's town hall. So Paige, thanks so much for your support, and thanks to everybody on the committee. And thank you all for your feedback and input. It's going to help us really improve the online fee moving forward to ensure that we have a better future in digital learning for PSU. And we appreciate your contribution to this process.